Stacy, it's great to see you. Welcome back.
Good to be here. Thank you.
Let's start with where you think the chip strength will continue and where you think it might be looking a little spongy.
Yeah, you bet. So there's a broad debate going on right now, this kind of peak cycle versus stronger for longer. I'd say from a sentiment standpoint, it sort of depends on, the day of the week maybe, but right now the stronger for longer seems to have it. Most of the companies had very strong outlooks in the most recent earnings season. Tons of analyst days, great bullish long-term kind of blue skies kind of forecasts. At the same time, personally, I find myself a little more in the former camp, and I have to be honest. And while demand is still very strong, we still have shortages and everything else. I think there's also evidence of overshipment in many end markets.
Mm-hmm.
Auto, for example, is a great one. It's been most impacted by the shortages. We've seen massive production shortfalls. At the same time, you sort of compare auto semi sales versus shipments. Auto shipments are probably, down 20% or so, maybe more versus pre-COVID levels. Auto semi sales are probably 20% higher than they were pre-COVID. So it's a massive discrepancy.
Right.
You also look at other areas like in industrial and, and again, people are complaining about shortages, but the distributors that send a lot of that stuff into that channel, they're all building tons of inventory right now. I think in the latest quarter, the big disties, their inventory dollars are up like 30% year over year. So while production shortages are real and there are point shortages that are causing that, I also think that there's evidence of stockpiling and overshipment as well. And so we'll see how that plays out as we go into next year.
Correct me if I'm wrong. So NXP was a name that you kind of first brought our attention to in terms of the auto overshipment. You still have a market perform on them. You have a market perform on Texas Instruments, I believe. Basically translate what you're seeing in the inventory into a market call, because for most of the rest of the space, it looks like you still see outperformance.
It depends. So, by the way, what do we like in this environment? Where I am a little nervous about these sort of things, I like Broadcom. It's got a little more of a margin of safety. They've got more control over their semi business. They've got a software business which is less volatile and higher margins. They're deploying a ton of cash. It's one of the cheapest things in the space. I like that. I also like things that are, call it more secular versus cyclical. So, for example, Qualcomm, where they've got some really good drivers in terms of content increase in smartphones. And unlike some other end markets, PCs, for example, where we saw a lot of pull forward potentially, we didn't see that in smartphones. So I'm a little less worried there. I like NVIDIA, which has an eye-watering valuation, but the narrative there seems to be getting stronger, not weaker. I also like SemiCap, where, look, I think spending on equipment this year is going to be pretty big. So I like SemiCap. We are a little more cautious on some of the more cyclical names. You mentioned a couple, NXP, Texas Instruments, for example. And again, I don't hate them. Just NXP, I'm a little nervous about automotive and the sustainability, and they've got half of their revenues in auto. And TI is actually telling us that we've hit peak cycle. So TI was like the one outlier. They actually told everybody our customer order patterns have changed. They're no longer looking to expedite orders for everything. They're just looking for the point products that they need to complete their kits. Our lead times are basically back to normal. Yes, we're probably over shipping. They'll admit it. They don't care, right? TI figures we ship it today, we ship it tomorrow. What's the difference? But we are hearing that kind of a narrative change from them.
Fascinating. So again, TI's Texas Instruments trading around 189. The SMH ETF is up at about 314, 315. It's not like you're going to make a call on that ETF, but what kind of performance does this view bake in as likely for the sector, broadly speaking, this year?
Look, you can look at valuations, for example, for the space, and they're not egregious. Like the semi's sort of like blended price to forward earnings is about in line with the S&P. Now, historically, the semis do tend to trade at a bit of a discount, call it 5 to 10% in like a normal environment. So they are elevated versus history. I could make the argument that maybe semis shouldn't trade at a discount, but they typically do. So they're a little bit higher, but they're not like massively egregious, not too bad. At the same time, I don't think you're pricing in like a downturn. We'll see how this goes. Like this sort of thing, it's going to look good until the day that it doesn't. The way this typically shows up, by the way, right now demand is very strong. You have lead times that are very long. Lead times are how long it takes to get a product after you place the order. The issue is we don't know how much of this demand is real and how much of it is not. Typically what happens when you can't get parts that you need that they're going to take a long time, you order more. It's the toilet paper situation from last year, like writ large. We won't know what's going on really until the lead times start to normalize. As supply and demand gets back into balance, the lead times pull back in. Then we'll find out how much of the demand is real and how much of it is not. And if that demand, those lead times pull in and the demand is still there, I think you can underwrite it. Until then, I think it's going to be an overhang, and we'll just have to see how it plays out. I am nervous. So like I said, there's enough evidence around potential stockpiling and overshipping to make me somewhat nervous, at least in some of these end markets.
Duly noted, and we'll see if it takes 3 months, 6 months, 9 months as it plays out this year.
I wish I could tell you. I feel like it's my job to have a better answer for that, and I just don't. All I can do is do the math.
Listen,
the math is making me somewhat nervous in some of these markets.
You gave us the game plan. If you can't give us a date, that's okay.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.